complicated than that. Here, if you can imagine, it is the road through the village with a right-angle bend and another right-angle bend into the village. And this is the mill bridge, which is a humpback bridge. And here we had stationed our Stokes mortar. And the tactics were as follows. The first Panzer tank to arrive, we allowed to cross the bridge, go round the corner, and when it was in that straight, it would be blocked by mines in front and mines behind. So it was trapped. And at that stage, they would fire at it with everything they'd got. Mills bombs, Molotov cocktails, and small arms, and try and set it on fire. Now the second Panzer, however, belonged to the professor and myself. And along came the Panzer, and when it was on the crest of the bridge, we would fire our Stokes mortar and destroy it, which meant that another tank was knocked out and the bridge was blocked, and the Panzer Division couldn't reach Gloucester. I think the plan was very, very flawed in every way. As soon as anybody had fired at them, these tanks would have shot off hundreds of rounds and destroyed everybody in sight. But it seemed to make something we could do. And I think doing something was probably what the Home Guard existed on.
The War Office had little time to organise hundreds of thousands of part-time soldiers, so local commanders were given free rein to test out their own strategies. They began to assume more and more bizarre forms. Makeshift Marines patrolled the rivers in converted pleasure boats. Dogs were taught to disarm enemy paratroopers.
And so the skating section goes into action, and that means action.
And the specialist force was trained to roller skate into battle. It was now clear that the War Office was unable to turn the Home Guard into a credible defence force capable of taking on crack German troops.
When you work out the kind of army they've got, you know, they'd have slaughtered a lot of us, you know, no doubt about that.
What's that supposed to be, boy?
Well, you said if you had nothing else, we'd tie a carving knife to a broom handle.
I didn't say keep the brush on the end of it, you stupid boy.
Well, he should have stayed.
I don't want any insubordination.
Dad's army, of course, shows the Home Guard as rather amateur and rather bungling. But we need to remember that, especially in the early days, it was amateur and it was bungling.
But in the summer of 1940, Home Guard training would be transformed, not by the government, but by a former communist revolutionary.
Nice car, mate.
Take a look at the stunning new Astra. Go drive.
I'm angry with my mum for doing this. I know that she didn't ask for cancer, and she doesn't deserve it. But if she hadn't smoked, we wouldn't have to be doing this.
More than anything, I feel like I've let my children down. It's the gamble. I took it and I've lost.
For help giving up, call 0800 169 0169. Who wants to buy a bucket?
I'm in.
Who wants to build a road?
I'm in.
Who wants to fight disease?
I'm in.
And ensure people have the right to earn a decent living?
I'm in. I'm in.
Who wants to help end poverty once and for all?
I'm in.
With your help, we can make this world a fairer place. Visit oxfam.org.uk/I'm in or text in to 87099. Are you in?
Hover phone. Well done, Rebecca. Another one there for the idea stew. Morning, Todd. Morning. Now, remember, there's no such thing as a bad idea. Todd.
I was thinking 10% on our regular saver account.
That's great.
10% on our regular saver account. Barclays. Now there's a thought.
Yeah, so Powergen are cheaper than... Actually, it's bad karma to say it out loud.
Cheaper than British Bus.
Positive energy from Powergen.
Oi, Churchill, could you save me up to 150 quid on my car insurance?
Oh, yes.
With 24-hour assistance if I have an accident?
Yes.
A 5-year guarantee on repairs?
Yes.
A courtesy car while you're fixing mine?
Oh, yes.
Oh, and can I have my own personal chauffeur called Les?
No.
But I could still save up to 150 quid on my car insurance?
Oh, yes.
See how much you could save on your car insurance. Give the dog a phone now on 0800 200 300 or log on to churchill.com.
I love you.
Steady now.
That was me a few months ago at my local NHS Stop Smoking service. It's a free service run by trained professionals who give you a goal to work towards.
Yes!
For me, getting a step-by-step program from experts was a lot better than quitting on my own.
For details of your local service, call 0800 169 0169.
Hurry down to your local Vauxhall retailer, where the Astra SXi is now available with no deposit, 0% finance and free insurance.
While I'm alone, blue as can be.
A tale of power, rage, and insanity. With a happy ending. Downfall, Thursday at 9 on 4.
By July 1940, many in the Home Guard were fed up with the old-fashioned training and poor weapons. But one man had a vision that would transform the Home Guard. World War I veteran Tom Wintringham was a former communist who had volunteered to fight against the fascists in the Spanish Civil War.
Tom Wintringham had led the British battalion in the Spanish Civil War. He had actually fought guerrilla warfare, and this is what he was convinced was the only way of resisting the Nazis in 1940. In Spain, he had observed a People's Army at work, and he had come to develop a training course in guerrilla warfare, which he'd become quite expert on.
Tom Wintringham had written a book called The People's War, in which he explained how guerrilla warfare would be organized. Very, very primitive, but guerrilla warfare is very often sufficiently powerful to defeat the most powerful enemy in the world.
Wintringham was one of the leading journalists of the time and was a regular columnist for the best-selling paper The Picture Post.
And one night he was eating with the editor, Tom Hopkinson, and the owner of the Picture Post, Lord Hulton. And he said, look, I want somewhere where I can teach the defence volunteers how to let off bombs, blow up tanks, how to learn guerrilla warfare, how to garrote German sentries, and so on. And Hulton said, I've got a friend, Lord Jersey, and he owns Osterley Park. So why not come to Osterley Park and form your training school here?
In the unlikely setting of a stately home on the outskirts of West London, Tom Wintringham created the first guerrilla training school in Britain, embracing a whole new form of combat that prepared ordinary men to tackle an occupying army. On the 10th of July 1940, Osterley Park opened its gates. Volunteers flooded in from across the country.
Well, it's extraordinary, just being here again after 65 years, July 1940. But I don't remember exactly, but I think I'd read an article that Tom Wintringham had written in one of the papers about this. And I said to a school friend of mine, we got the summer to fill in before we went into the Air Force, let's go and have a look. So we got on the tube, came to Osterley Park, tube, walked down here, looked at this field. It was about 40 or 50 miscellaneous chaps standing around as if they were waiting for a pick-up football match to start. And that was it, and we were in the first intake.
The functions of the Home Guard are thus becoming pretty clear, and an intensive training school which has no illusions on the subject has been started at Osterley Park.
Wintringham assembled here an extraordinary range of teachers. Many of them came from Spain and the Spanish Civil War. There was, for example, Hugh Slater from Spain, his number 2. There was a desperado called Hank Levi. Life magazine had a portrait of him, and they called him looks tough, is tough, fights tough, the master of the quick, quiet kill. There were 2 Basque miners who were experts on gunpowder. At the other end, incredibly, there were rather unworldly types like Roland Penrose, the painter who taught camouflage, and the chief scout Stanley White, who taught woodcraft. And one mustn't forget Mad Major Vernon, who had actually been convicted of treason in the mid-1930s for spying for Russia, but he was in charge of bombs. It's not surprising the whole lot terrified the War Office.
Osterley Park became the most sophisticated training centre for irregular warfare in the country.
When you came in here, within 10 minutes, they got the thing going and you were off. There was no filling in forms, there was no hanging about. You started right in on it.
Old-fashioned army training was thrown out the window. The priority was for every individual to learn how to think and act for themselves.
The training here consisted of a 2-day course. There was absolutely no drill, no uniforms, no hierarchy at all. It was how to fight a guerrilla war.
Within 20 minutes, you were digging a foxhole, or you were learning how to stalk somebody, or how to creep up on the back of a sentry and kill him at night, how to make a hand grenade out of dynamite and a piece of piping. And learning to do that gave you a lot of confidence. You felt you might have to use it next week.
This is where Mad Major Vernon kept the explosives. Imagine that full of bombs of one kind or another. He and his Basque miners from Spain taught all kinds of bomb making, grenades, Molotov cocktails, mortar bombs, etc. They also taught how to make the gunpowder, where to buy the saltpeter and for how much and so on, and from what chemists. All highly illegal today, but these were desperate times. And in fact, all over Osterley, you would find some kind of irregular war training going on. Of course, there was a big rifle range, but there were also tank traps. There was a street outside with houses due for demolition where they taught street warfare, imagining last-ditch defence of towns. And that was taught nowhere else, not even in the regular army.
Every corner of Osterley Park was converted into an elaborate military training zone. Even the most unlikely objects could be adapted into potential weapons.
The tank. Everybody knew after the Blitzkrieg in Europe that was the main threat. But what were a bunch of amateur soldiers going to do about that? We had no anti-tank weapons. But there were some very simple things you could do. You had to slow a tank down before you could get at it. What can you use? A simple dinner plate out of the kitchen, or a group of them. Put them down in the road and slightly cover them with earth in this sort of way. And this would slow a tank down, because he'd see it and think it were landmines. That gives you a chance to come from out of your cover and attack the tank with grenades. You're a dead duck if you can't get within 6 feet of the tank. But once you were close to the tank, you were out of the range of the tank's weapons, which couldn't be depressed. So 2 people attacking from each side with grenades would go for the tracks, which are the most vulnerable part. You might be lucky.
In 1940, Stuka dive bombers were a terrifying part of the Nazi Blitzkrieg. So here, they taught the guys how to bring them down. From this tree, they suspended wires. On the wires, there were model Stuka. The idea was that you lay on the ground here, and you try to bring down the Stuka with a 303 before it could reach the ground and no doubt blast you to smithereens. Sounds incredible, but Wintringham reckoned in Spain he and his men had actually brought down fascist aircraft using 303 rifles.
5,000 volunteers were trained in the first 3 months, including soldiers from the British Army. And the school attracted huge press attention from across the world.
Osterley made a huge impact right from the beginning. It had cover stories in the Illustrated London News, Sphere magazine. Radio wanted to do a documentary about it. American journalists wouldn't stay away. It had more column inches in the American press than the British cabinet. It was hugely popular, and quite rightly so, because it was actually teaching guys what they wanted to learn. It was absolutely on the nail and practical.
Osterley Park, where members of the Home Guard are undergoing a course on, roughly speaking, the scientific destruction of the enemy, received a visit from a group of MPs. Surely more schools of this kind are needed. We all want to know the best way of handing out cocktails to unwelcome guests.
At first, the government appeared to support Osterley Park, but its interest was double-edged. Despite the school's enormous success, Wintringham's communist past provoked deep concern in the corridors of power.
MI5 was worried by Osterley because it was led by the Red Revolutionary, and they didn't like the thought that all these subversives or potential subversives were running around teaching people to make bombs. They just didn't think that Basque miners were the right sort of chaps to teach the Home Guard how to resist the Nazis. They didn't know where it would lead. And in the summer of 1940, anything could have happened, even some kind of revolution.
The government could take no chances. After just 3 months, the War Office moved in, and the army took control of Osterley Park. Wintringham and his team were pushed aside, and even prevented from becoming officers in the regular army.
It's sometimes said there was a political agenda, and this was a bunch of socialist revolutionaries at the end of the Piccadilly line who were planning to use the Home Guard for an insurrection. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's total bunkum.
Tom Wintringham would never be acknowledged for his groundbreaking training, but the impact of Osterley Park was immense. The government was so impressed by the training that 3 more specialist Home Guard schools were rapidly set up. Across the country, techniques that had been pioneered by Wintringham and his team would become standard Home Guard training.
Whatever would be able to be used to kill and destroy and remove the enemy was fair.
And it was all guerrilla warfare, hit and run.
In the following months, the new training would transform the Home Guard into an impressive fighting unit. But it wasn't just Wintringham who attracted the attention of MI5. The secret services were on red alert and encouraged the whole population to watch out not just for invading forces, but also for enemies within. Fired up by the government, fear of subversives and collaborators reached almost hysterical proportions. The country was gripped by paranoia, and German spies and fifth columnists appeared to be everywhere.
Das ist gut. Sehr gut.
The fifth column was the name given to what were believed to be a vast network of spies and saboteurs put in place by the Germans before the war.
It was pretty obvious that the fifth column were quite active in this area, but personally speaking, I can't say that I ever met up with any such suspicious character. But of course we were warned enough by posters around everywhere, careless talk costs lives, and so most of us were on our guard.
You were aware of the fifth column, and you'd look at all strangers.
Do you see the way he walked? Do you see the way he talked? Strange. He looked funny, and he said something that was against the war. Must be a fifth columnist.
The Home Guard was dispatched to patrol any potential target. Nowhere was safe from Nazi saboteurs.
My duty was to guard this reservoir. There may be, we thought, that supposedly a fifth columnist could creep up with a 20-litre tin of cyanide, or indeed parachutists from the sky.
Remember, this was 1940, and we're dead scared.
In fact, on the Thursday night guard, on one occasion, there was obviously a very nervous Home Guard because he came up against some bushes on the reservoir, and they were rustling. Something was behind these bushes, and he sort of brought his rifle up and said, "Halt, who goes there?" And the rustling still went on. "Halt, who goes there, else I'll fire." The rustling still went on. There was a slight pause. And he fired, and there was a great thump on the other side of the bushes. And when he walked round, I'm afraid there was a dead white horse strewn on the ground.
The fifth column fear was very great indeed. However, the actual fifth column was, as much as anything, a figment of the popular imagination, although it should be said that government departments believed in it just as fervently as the public.
But the hysteria reached a peak in the autumn of 1940. The sound that the whole country had been dreading rang out across the country to signal that the Nazi invasion had started.
We won't be a second.
Should we?
Nah, more than give you a car insurance quote in a couple of minutes. It's dead easy.
Lucky?
Nice car, Tom.
Yeah. Hey, look, I've got my quote.
That's lucky.
Andy says I could save even more if I buy online.
That's more than lucky.
Save more on car insurance when you buy online at morethan.com.
Superior flat screen technology from Hitachi. A great picture, whichever way you look at it.
Daydream, I dream of you amid the flowers. For a couple of hours, such a beautiful day.
They want to kill someone that hasn't done anything wrong.
It's like somebody put a giant ATM on our front lawn.
If anything happens to me or my family, you'll be killed.
What is the price of oil?
Corruption is why we win.
Syriana.
Simple pleasures in life are a gift. Visa. Love every day.
I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here.
I shouldn't be here.
Thanks to Cancer Research UK, thousands of people are here today who wouldn't have survived 10 years ago.
My mum should be here.
Please help more people to be here. Call 0800 038 8000 and give £2 a month to Cancer Research UK.
Jeff, I've got it. We'll beat your insurance deal. I'll give you £50.
If it's cheaper, we'll drop our price and give you £50.
Kiss. No kiss.
We're so confident we'll beat your home insurance renewal that if it's cheaper, we'll drop our price.
Hello.
And give you £50 when you switch. Insurance from Barclays. Now there's a thought.
Environmentally friendly O'Reilly technology from Hitachi. Conserve your energy.
It's funny, I never realised Jane was such a worrier. Safety, security, you name it, she worries about it. I'm a lot more laid back. Where's my... What are we doing?
Online banking.
Bit risky for you.
BT Broadband now helps protect you against fraud, email viruses and other online threats, so you can relax.
Just setting up our joint account.
Get BT Broadband with our best ever security package.
Tonight's episode of ER is the one
Passenger jet crash, the 5700.
you don't want to miss.
Doc, talk to me.
Either respond.
ER, after the Real Dad's Army.
In the autumn of 1940, the fear of a Nazi invasion reached its peak. The whole country was on red alert. Hundreds of thousands of volunteers were prepared to fight for their country, and one night is etched in the minds of many of these men. A night that shows just how ready they were for invasion.
On that day of September the 7th, of course, we had the real alarm, and it was not a false alarm.
We thought that the invasion had actually started, and because there was an awful lot of activity, a great deal of air activity, and of course the church bells ringing was a clear sign.
The pealing of the church bells swiftly spread across the country. This was the signal for the Home Guard to mobilize.
There was a code word, Cromwell, and Cromwell meant simply invasion imminent. And that would be broadcast, that was the call to action.
I had to cycle round Basingstoke, and I had to knock up all the people who were in my own particular platoon.
I may have been in bed a quarter of an hour, it was longer if that. And there was this rattling on the window, which was somebody throwing gravel up to the window. See? So still I never thought, like, you know, you never expect these things like this. So I got out, opened up the window, see, and the chap standing there was an old farmer who was one of the blokes had a telephone. So he said, I've had a message from Captain Kendall to tell you that the code word is Cromwell. I was absolutely dumbstruck for seconds, you know, with the knowledge that there was going to be a German invasion of England. You know, I couldn't believe it.
The Home Guard rushed to take up their positions. Every man knew his job. Eric Higgs and his platoon of 19 men rapidly set up their roadblock.
We had no time to put a tea in the flask. You didn't say, oh, I'll make a cup of tea first, did you, Hank? You grabbed a bike. I was still putting the uniform on, went up across the fields that night. Grabbed the bike and the gun and shot down here.
The 7th of September 1940, we were brought to this very spot to patrol and keep guard.
The sight that met my eye was women appearing as if by magic with broomsticks and rolling pins and all sorts of peculiar gardening weapons, and coming out and brandishing these because they were quite sure that I was a German parachutist. But the women, sadly, they manhandled me and pushed me off the bicycle. I managed to, after a bit, recover and continue on my rounds, and then of course I got to another part of Basingstoke, and it all started again.
Once in position, the Home Guard then had to wait for the expected invasion.
They were going to land all the way down the coast beyond Weymouth and right around